Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. My talk with you this morning is bifurcated into two separate and distinct subjects. The first is what is happening on the ground in Israel and Gaza and Egypt and in much of the Arab world. It is phenomenal, and you should know that on Friday, this coming Friday, the Nobel Peace Prize will be awarded. And there are many who are saying whatever the Nobel Committee had in mind, the Nobel Peace Prize should go to Donald Trump. So let me weigh in on this very carefully and, yes, critically. Donald Trump deserves all the credit in the world for what is happening right now in the Middle East. When he arrives in the Middle East, and he suggested this morning that he would like to speak to the Israeli parliament, when he arrives, he will be greeted as a hero, and he deserves that recognition. The President of the United States pulled something off that is absolutely phenomenal. And the people of Israel, left, right, and center, are rejoicing today at what will be, we are told, on Monday, the return of all the hostages, living and dead. Donald Trump deserves full credit, and I will be interested to see what the Nobel Committee does when it comes to the question of a peace prize for Donald Trump. I am a critic of Donald Trump, let's be clear. But in this case, he has achieved a monumental moment in history, and he will be remembered for all time for having achieved what no one else was able to achieve. I was asked by a Trump critic how I could say such nice things about Donald Trump. And the answer is because when someone achieves something that makes a difference in the world, he or she deserves credit. I don't know what the Nobel Peace Prize Committee will do. The Nobel Peace Prize is a treasured item. There are many who disapprove of Donald Trump on so many levels, but the Nobel Committee will have to consider the question of whether Donald Trump deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. We now face what goes on after the hostages come back on Sunday, or maybe Monday. It was a little unclear this morning. What will the reaction of the world be? I can tell you it will be one of rejoicing. This crisis, which was created exactly 2 years ago on the Hebrew calendar, is, well, unthinkable before 2 years ago, and now a reality. But there is more. When the hostages are returned, when the bodies of those who have died are returned, what happens next? Will there be an overall peace settlement in the Middle East? It seems highly unlikely. But President Trump is determined to proceed forward in trying to ensure the security for all. Let me say, as a Trump critic, 3 cheers for Donald Trump. I hope that he and his team succeed. If, in fact, we can move forward to try to stabilize the Middle East, more power to them. And may I say, the Israelis deserve credit too. They destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon. They destroyed the Iranian nuclear capability. They have leveled Hamas's ability to wreak havoc, at least in Gaza. The Israeli military served an effective but very controversial moment because, well, not everybody agrees with the Israeli tactic. But remember, please, that the one thing the Israelis wanted more than anything else was the release of the hostages. And their military and strategic efforts, along with the efforts of Donald Trump, have paid off. And that, to me, well, that's a very special moment. We'll be talking more about this, particularly as the process continues. I would be remiss if I did not say a few words about what is happening domestically. You know that troops have now been dispatched to Chicago. You know that in Portland, there is a real resistance to what Donald Trump is doing domestically. When I began this podcast, I suggested we had to bifurcate, we had to separate the issues of success and failure, of applause and criticism. I am concerned about the exercise of presidential power in the way that Donald Trump is using it now. This will be tested in the courts. It will ultimately go all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the American system will be tested as it is being tested now. How we, as a nation, will respond to a president exercising disputed power, and it is disputed, is going to be critical to our constitutional process. I make no bones about it. The president, I think, has overreached. I listened to Kristi Noem this morning and her comments about what's happening in Portland, and I listened as well to people in Portland and their comments, and I listened to the president, who repeated the other day that Portland is burning. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so, in the end, the question of whether the president will invoke the Insurrection Act is going to be something that all Americans will watch. Should there be an Insurrection Act used by Donald Trump to circumvent the courts and to make what I think is more of a political statement than a police statement? The answer is we're going to find out. We're going to find out how far Donald Trump can go in terms of exercising domestic authority. And let me add that when the president speaks about putting the governor of Illinois in prison and the mayor of Portland in prison, all of us should pause, whether you support Trump or oppose Trump. All of us should pause and consider the implications of a statement like that by the President of the United States. We're in for some interesting days, and the Supreme Court, now being in session, is going to have to make some tough decisions. And the lower federal courts, they're going to continue to act as well. And in the end, the final arbiter will be the Supreme Court. And what the Supreme Court does, my friends, is what we're going to be watching. This moment in time, absolutely fascinating. Whether one views the hostage return and the Middle East, or whether one views American domestic politics. And yes, we can do both at the same time, make critical comments in terms of one and the other, and still understand the central role that the United States of America plays, not only in our own domestic affairs, but in international affairs. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. Make sure to follow along. Let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. Of course, you can interact with me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course by direct email. And some of you even have the audacity to call me, for which I'm very grateful. And to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast, thanks, Gogo. Every day you make sure we're up and running, and I appreciate it more than I can say. And by the way, so do our listeners. People ask me, how is Gogo? So I want you to know you're something of a celebrity. I am John Rothman, avidly watching the news today to see what happens, and I can't wait for tomorrow. And by the way, I can't wait for Monday. If the hostages are returned, boy, oh boy, will there be a celebration. All right, keep listening, spread the word, and I'll be back tomorrow right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.